Colonel Eskew. Oh, sure. Representative Bachla has a question before you
I know
start.
that a physician in a different state would be difficult to bring here for testimony, but would it be possible that we could schedule a special meeting for a video interview?
I don't know we have capabilities to do a video interview. The problems are twofold with him because he is in Arkansas. He also is a court expert a lot, and he said following COVID, he's literally in court every day, and we've confirmed as much as we could to that account. He's willing to come. We also have to pay for him to come is the other part of it. We could inquire about doing some sort of video. I don't know if we as a staff have capabilities for that, but we can explore it a little bit more and see if something can be arranged.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, now, Colonel Eskew, sorry. Yes, so Colonel Eskew, you were referenced by Matthew Block, Executive Counsel for the Governor, somebody who had information pertinent to the committee. I don't think before, I think you were also identified in Colonel Reeves' journal as the person who showed videos to the Executive Council. I don't think before that moment did we really come across your name in our inquiry yet. That said, I guess my first question for you would be, when did you first learn about the Ronald Greene incident? Oh, and you need to introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Chris Eskew. I'm a Deputy Superintendent of Support currently. And you want me to start with my position at the time?
Yeah, what was your position at the time?
My position at the time, I was moved back into Internal Affairs as the commander in May of 2020.
Who was the commander before May of 2020?
That would have been now Lieutenant Colonel Chavez Kamen.
Okay. And I saw when I was reviewing documents, Larvadane, was he a commander of?
She is the current commander.
I'm sorry.
She's the current commander. Well, she just got promoted to major, but so Lieutenant Colonel Kamen, myself, and then she was promoted to Commander of Internal Affairs after myself.
Okay. So how long were you Commander of Internal Affairs for?
So at that time, May of 2020, I was a captain. I was lateraled back into Internal Affairs, and I served there until my current appointment in April of 2021.
So roughly a year.
Yes, sir.
But when did you, and who did you report to while you were in charge of IA?
Typically Chief of Staff and the Superintendent, Kevin Reeves.
And Chief of Staff being Doug Kane?
That was Bob Brown.
Or Bob Brown at the time.
Yes, sir.
And were you involved in weekly meetings? How does the command structure work while you were IA?
Those senior command meetings I was not involved with. In my current role, we do have Monday meetings, and all senior commanders are there. In my role as Internal Affairs Captain, I was not a part of those meetings.
Okay. When did you first learn about the Ronald Greene incident?
So May. There were some federal requests for information regarding the Ronald Greene incident in June of 2020, although we, Internal Affairs, did not have an administrative case started at that point. So fast forward to August of 2020, August 25th, 2020, Chief Brown sent me an email to open the administrative investigation into the death of Mr. Greene.
Let me back. When did you first learn? I understand when the IA investigation started, but when did you, as a trooper, first learn about the Ronald Greene incident?
It would have been similar time frame. So I mentioned the June federal request because it was a subpoena sent to the department. I don't know. All I know is my role as the Commander of Internal Affairs. We, at that moment, didn't have anything related to the Ronald Greene incident. So to answer your question, it would have been about that time that I was first made aware of an incident in general although it wasn't in my internal affairs world.
Sure. And so you're first contacted by Internal Affairs to start an investigation by Bob Brown in August of 2020?
Yes, sir, who was then the chief of staff.
Okay. And what did he ask you to do?
The email pretty much said, open an administrative investigation on the Ronald Greene incident.
Who were you supposed to investigate?
When we get those requests, it's an open-ended request, and we start looking for evidence and gathering evidence and identifying who was there, who was involved. No direction typically is given when a internal affairs investigation is open. It's just open the investigation and we start investigating.
And look, I'm going to highlight my first concern. We've requested emails in various forms and fashions since this committee got started. We do not seem to have a copy of the Bob Brown email to you about the internal affairs investigation.
We can absolutely provide that. I'm out of the loop on what was
I
requested
understand.
and provided.
I'm not directing it at you. I'm just
Yes, sir.
directing it that the fact that this committee has continually asked for those documents, and I think that should have been provided at this point. And I realize that's not a reflection on you. So you start with the IA investigation. I'm assuming you didn't do it personally. You turned it over to somebody else.
So when we get requests for administrative investigations, we assign an investigator, a co-investigator, and then start gathering evidence.
And who were the investigator and the co-investigator?
So in that incident, we opened cases on Dakota DeMoss, Chris Hollingsworth, and Corey York.
And who were the investigators in doing the IA investigation of those officers?
So the DeMoss one would have been Kevin Dakota. The Chris Hollingsworth would have been Richard Buckland. And the Corey York one would have been Michael Talley, I'm sorry.
But y'all did not open one up for Clary.
No, sir, at the time.
What was the logic and reasoning in that?
So when we started gathering our evidence, we reviewed audit logs of the body cam videos of the personnel we identified at the scene. And in our review of that, videos were uploaded into evidence.com and downloaded. So the specific video for Clary at the time was uploaded and it showed downloaded. We were not aware that it was not part of the criminal investigation. We tried to keep our administrative investigations separate from the criminal investigations.
Right, but you were not investigating John Clary for under IA at that time?
At the time, no, sir.
Why not?
Because he arrived on the scene after the interaction with Mr. Greene was over. He arrived on the scene as the reporting supervisor, and his body cam information didn't reflect anything that would have caused us to make him what we would call a target.
So your testimony is that y'all reviewed the John Clary body cam video initially and did not believe that there was anything to warrant further investigation?
At the scene, no, sir, we did not.
Have you reviewed the John Clary video of what he's witnessing and not stopping?
Yes, sir.
I got to be honest with you. It's really hard to me to understand that y'all would review that video and not think that that's at least worth. I'm not saying find it and finding anything, but at least not worthy of furthering on an investigation. Okay. So when did y'all start an IA investigation of John Clary?
That would have been, fast forward to March, April of 2021, when the question about the video being provided to the criminal investigators was known.
And ultimately, y'all did not find that there was a finding in that IA investigation.
That investigation was after my time in internal affairs, but that investigation was a not sustained finding.
And did you ever consider putting any of the officers involved on administrative leave?
That would be a decision by the appointing authority, and from an investigator's perspective, we did not.
When you say appointing authority, what does that mean?
That'd be the colonel would
Would
place
make,
people on.
do y'all recommend putting people on administrative leave?
Historically, no. It's based on evidence, and what we would see in the videos. An investigation was conducted, and that now would probably be an appropriate time to describe criminal investigation and internal affairs investigation, administrative investigation. Typically, the department was in a practice of waiting until the criminal investigation played out, whether there was going to be charges or not, and many times those decisions are made very quickly after the incident. And the department historically was in a operation of before an administrative investigation was requested, the criminal piece of it would be at least, are there going to be criminal charges or not? So this obviously was a delayed time frame, and what caused the email request of administrative investigators at the time, I believe, was that D.A. Belton said that at the time he was not proceeding with criminal charges. So we were then asked to conduct the administrative investigation.
Okay. When officers who are being called to do an IA investigation are being called to be witnesses, do they have the option to not participate in the investigation?
In my experience, anyone that I recall that was asked to be or notified that they're a witness did participate.
Did?
Did. I don't recall anyone not.
But Jerry Spencer and Gary Beasley did not participate in the investigation of John Clary, isn't that correct?
That sounds correct. Again, that investigation was after my time, so I'm not 100% on the facts of that case. But
so what you're telling me is it's unusual that people would not participate, and then you also recognize that people did not participate.
Just from what I recall of seeing in that investigation, and not involved in it, but I believe those people were no longer in the department.
Okay.
And if you're an employee of the department, you could be ordered to participate by the appointing authority.
At what point did you obtain the Clary video?
So that video was downloaded in the September timeframe. So right after we got the investigation request, in the first week or so of September, that video was downloaded for our use in our investigation.
And who did the download?
That would have been Richard Buckland.
Of the Clary video?
Yes.
Doesn't show up in the audit logs.
Dakota, I believe did the DeMoss video.
Not my reading of the. That's. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. And so Richard Buckland down, and who was he investigating?
He was in the Hollingsworth investigation.
He downloaded it, he said September of 2020?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And our use of evidence.com was still evolving at the time. Not every investigator had a user account at the time, but we were in the discovery mode of downloading and retrieving all the videos related to the incident.
Okay. I'll take a break and I'll come. I'm going to take a break and let Representative Marcel ask some questions. She has to be somewhere else.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your current position?
I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Support.
And during this investigation, you were over internal affairs?
I was the captain in internal affairs. Yes, ma'am.
You were the captain. How long do people typically, are they over internal affairs? It looks like just a short period. It was a lot of turnover during that time. Is that common?
So, not common. I had been in internal affairs before as a trooper and a lieutenant, and then I was lateral back as a captain at the time. The previous section I was in, I was there for 8 years, so I wasn't told why I was being transferred or why I went to internal affairs at the time, but it was a move to internal affairs, and
I'm just trying to figure out, this looks like a high volume of turnover of people leading departments during this period, the Ronald Greene period. And it looks like you say you stayed somewhere 8 years prior to that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then they transferred you to internal affairs during the Ronald Greene's death investigation.
It was before, but shortly thereafter, the investigation came up.
Shortly thereafter, the investigation came up. Okay, and how long did you stay there?
I was there from May of 2020 to April of 2021.
So just a year.
Yes, ma'am.
That's kind of strange, but anyway, how did you find out the officers that were on the scene in the beating death of Ronald Greene? How were you able to determine that? You said you got a call to start an investigation.
Just got an email from the chief.
An email,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
An email.
And as part of the investigation, we look at desk logs, we look at radio logs, we look at body cam information from anybody involved in that scene or incident.
Right, but I heard you tell Representative McGee that you all did not you didn't think it was necessary to look at Clary's video at the time.
We did absolutely download it and look at and use Clary's video for our investigation.
So you saw Clary's video when?
September 9th when it was downloaded.
September 9th.
Or whatever point, I'll say the 9th. The time it was downloaded in September, we began using it for our investigation.
What criminal activity did you see, if any, on those when you downloaded? What did you personally feel?
I didn't note any.
You didn't note any criminal activities?
Obvious.
Did you see the same videos that we saw?
Yes, ma'am.
And you didn't note any criminal activities?
No, ma'am.
So do you stand by the fact that you looked at the videos that all the rest of the world looked at and you didn't think there was any criminal activity in those? You stand by that?
Well, I could say my role at the time was looking at it administratively, not criminally.
I'm not talking about your role. I'm talking about you and I as human beings and the rest of us that looked at the videos, right? And many people who have sat at that table said that they were horrific, they were disturbing, and you were over internal affairs. So I'm asking you personally, if it was somebody that you knew that was being beaten like Ronald Greene, would you then think it was some criminal activity or what? Help me with this.
So from the Clary video,
from any of the videos.
Well, the arrest incident, there's a criminal process to determine that, whether there was criminal actions or not, and that's still pending.
I'm asking you personally. Personally, you have been a trooper how long?
24 years.
24 years. Did you, after you viewed those videos, feel that there was any criminal activities by any of the troopers? That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
And I guess your answer is no?
I don't know that that's for me to answer.
It's for you to answer if I'm asking it. I'm asking you, as a state police that we entrust to protect and serve the citizens of Louisiana, do you, with 24 years of experience, formally over internal affairs, believe that there was no criminal activity in the beating of Ronald Greene? I mean, that's real simple.
And those processes are still in play.
I'm not talking about, you keep going to the processes. You're talking about what might happen, what somebody might find, what the feds might find. The feds are the feds, right?
Right.
This investigation could be separate from anything else. I'm just asking you from, you got 24 years of experience. You didn't just show up there. You're not a baby in state police. You know what criminal activity is. You know the policies and procedures of state police, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think you all may have looked at maybe policies and procedures in your internal affairs investigation, right?
Yes, ma'am. That is what's.
And that's what y'all.
Administrative.
That's what y'all. That's what y'all found in terms of turning off body cameras, that kind of stuff, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm just I can't get to my next question because I really hadn't gotten an answer about what I believe you should be able to answer, whether or not any of the stuff that you witnessed was criminal activity.
There were actions by the troopers that were taken for whatever reason they were taken. I was not at the scene.
Right.
I don't know, other than what I see in the video, I don't know what they perceived. I can't speak to that.
Okay, you don't know what they perceived, but we do know what their conversation was now because we heard the videos, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Lay on your effing stomach, don't effing move, right? That
Yes, ma'am.
those things. So you don't know. You heard Mr. Greene constantly moaning and saying, "Stop! I'm your brother. Don't hurt me. I'm scared." You heard that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just trying to figure out what other actions you need to hear to make a determination. I don't get it. I'm finished. I don't get it. But maybe, I don't know. There seems to be, and I'll say this and I'm going to be finished, some brotherhood, protection of other people in state police that people don't want to bring down or harm. I know you were in the same class with Lamar Davis and Reeves, Kane, right? Y'all were in the same class, right? Y'all came in the same time?
Yes, ma'am.
So y'all been knowing each other a long time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And look, go back to something I asked you about. You review the videos to determine, did you make the decision on who was going to be investigated at the scene under IA? Who made that decision?
So those decisions are made based on the evidence we see.
No, I didn't say who. I said who, not what decisions.
It would have been internal affairs, and ultimately that's my decision.
Ultimately, but who made the decision? Who said, guys, that's who we're investigating?
I would have.
Okay. So you watched the Clary video, and this is what I want to understand.
Yes, sir.
You see somebody alive,
Mhm.
then you see him not moving anymore in that video or in subsequent videos, and you see that Trooper Clary is on the scene while that takes place, and your judgment call was not to investigate the circumstances around that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's get to the video. How did you obtain the video?
The video was downloaded by
When I say video, John Clary's video.
The video was downloaded by one of the investigators.
By Buckland, you said, right? Buckland, not Buckley?
Buckland.
Okay. And how did it come into your possession?
Possession, at the time we were utilizing an internal affairs share drive that is accessible to our investigators, which would have included myself. For possession, I never really had possession of it. It was saved on the share drive and used by our investigators.
Well, Colonel Reeves' journal says that you showed the video, so I'm assuming that you had it in your possession at some point in time.
So, yes, sir. I would have, to show that video, I would have used a thumb drive to show the video.
Okay, so your testimony is that you used a thumb drive to retrieve the video from a shared drive that the investigators who had the shared drive.
Who had access?
Yes.
The investigators, the internal affairs investigators, and the people assigned to internal affairs.
Anybody besides internal affairs have access to the shared drive?
No, sir.
Bob Brown doesn't.
No, sir.
Okay. So the videos were put on your testimonies. The videos were taken by Buckland, and then uploaded to the shared drive by Buckland.
Correct.
And then you took that, put it on a thumb drive to show the governor's office.
That was our practice at the time, to utilize a shared drive for investigations, and to bring it somewhere. I wouldn't have had access to the shared drive. So I would have had to take it and put it on a thumb drive.
Okay. So you bring it to North Louisiana, was it to show the video, or you kept it here in Baton Rouge, right?
Yes, sir. I never traveled to North Louisiana.
And so you bring it where did this meeting take place where you showed the video?
To the governor?
Well, first to Tina Venetian Horn, I think, correct?
It would have been, so there's a conference room on the second floor, in that conference room of LSP headquarters.
And let me back up. How did you come to show this video? Who called you and said you need to show the video to Tina in the governor's office?
I was asked by Chief Brown.
Okay. How long before that were you asked, and then the meeting took place?
It was fairly quick.
What was the conversation with Bob Brown?
He just said, can you show at the time we had the DeMoss video, the Clary video. Those were the two of the scene, of the arrest and of the scene. Have those and meet whatever the time was to show.
Okay, so Bob Brown calls you up and says, hey, Chris, show the Clary video and the DeMoss video to Tina in the governor's office. No context?
No context. He told me what to have available and to show it, and I wasn't given a context of.
Okay. And in Kevin Reeves' journal entry, he does not reference the DeMoss video. He just references the Clary video.
Okay.
But you were instructed to show him both videos.
It's kind of bleeding together. There were a couple of meetings very close together. One being, I guess, the note of showing it to Tina, and then not long after that, or around the same time frame, the governor, Matthew Block, and Tina were also.
Your meeting, when you found out you were to show these videos, was that a meeting, or was it via telephone? Was it email? How did Bob Brown communicate that to you?
He called me.
He called you.
Yes, sir.
And y'all had no meeting before or after that, in between that time
No, sir.
period?
In fact,
just phone call.
During that time frame, during that October time frame, the Emergency Operations Center was activated, and I was actually working nights, and he called me to come in that afternoon before my shift that evening.
Okay, so who is in the room when you show Tina Venetian Horn the video?
I believe that time would have been just she. And the other time would have been the governor, Matthew Block, and Tina. And with regard to the LSP side, it would have been Colonel Reeves and Chief Brown, myself.
Okay, so you're saying it was just you and Tina in the conference room?
No, it would have been those LSP side too as well. Chief Brown, Colonel Reeves, and myself.
And Doug Kane?
I don't recall Doug being in there or not at the time.
Well, their journal entry says October 10th, 2020. It says Eskew showed Clary's video of RG to Tina, and then it is in parentheses Bob and Doug.
I can't dispute that.
Okay. How did Kevin Reeves learn about the meeting? Did you have any conversations with Colonel Reeves?
I don't know, no, sir.
Who would have informed him of the meeting for this journal entry?
All I know is who I was notified by. It may have been Colonel Reeves asked Chief Brown to ask me to show the video.
Okay.
But I don't have that information.
And how long did the meeting take place?
It was enough time to show the video, and it wasn't long. You know, whatever the video length is, I was not part of or included in any conversations. So really just the time to show the
Y'all
video.
just sat there in silence during the video and no conversation before and after, no context about why y'all are there, what's the purpose of the meeting to show Tina?
Not with me in the room.
Were they in the room together before you entered the room?
I don't recall, sir.
When do you recall how that meeting take place? You tell me and then I'll ask follow-up.
I showed up with the thumb drive in the video, and I showed the video. I don't recall if I was there ahead of time or if they were there before. My purpose was to show the video.
I understand your purpose. What happens after you did your purpose? Did you talk for a minute or you walked out immediately?
I was excused.
And they stayed in the room after?
Yes.
And then you left and went home after that?
No, I had my shift starting at the EOC that evening.
Okay. So you're still in the building. You're just not in the room?
So I was not in the room. What I did between there and my start of my shift, I'm not sure. I probably went over to the EOC early.
And you had zero conversation with anybody while you showed the video before and after in that room?
No, sir.
No, sir, you had no conversation?
No conversation.
Okay. So after that, did you have any further conversations with anybody related to the video?
No, sir. We continued our investigation.
And what was the outcome of your investigation?
So there were sustainments against Chris Hollingsworth. There were sustainments on Dakota Moss, and there were sustainments on Corey York.
Okay. And what were the sustainments?
There was, I don't have the list with me, sir.
Was anybody initially fired?
Yes,
Okay, who was terminated?
Chris Hollingsworth.
How long after his sustainment was he terminated?
So a disciplinary review committee was held. Termination was recommended. He would receive that almost immediately. You know, the decision letter would be generated. Decision page would be generated, and that was delivered either that day or the next day to him, that the intent of the appointing authority would be to terminate you. So that was delivered fairly quickly. And then I think it was that weekend that he got into his crash.
Okay. He wasn't terminated yet, though. He was just notified.
He was given a decision page, and what the practice we had at the time and still is currently, that decision page stops the investigation. It stops the clock. You're given the opportunity to, you'll get a laudermill letter in the future, but the thing he got was that decision page.
Okay. And what was the termination, or what was the status of the other officers involved?
So the Chris Hollingsworth case was first. That decision page was delivered. we were still working on the DeMoss and York investigations, and those were formalized and finalized later in October.
So how long did it take to investigate?
I don't know the days, but we're by State Police Commission rule obligated to a 60-day time frame, and we did comply with that time frame, and finished with and had a DRC before the 60th day.
So I think you said earlier, August 20th, you began the investigation, and you're telling me he was terminated by October. Does that sound correct?
Correct.
And you hadn't taken any action in October of the other two officers. Is that correct?
October 27th was a
Moss.
DRC for DeMoss and York, and their sustainments and decision were done then.
And what was their decisions? What was the outcome for those two?
I don't remember specific time, but they both got time off, suspension.
And what happened with DeMoss? He eventually got terminated. Is that correct?
Eventually was either terminated or resigned.
Okay, because he had another incident. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
With an issue review of excessive force, correct?
Yes, sir.
In light of that, do you think that his sustainment and disciplinary action worked?
They were I don't remember when the incidents were, but they were very close together. So I don't know that October 27th of 2020 wasn't after the other incident, if that makes sense. I don't have those dates, but.
So it would have affected your investigation that somebody you're investigating and you're coming to determination on gets involved in the second incident. That doesn't affect your disciplinary action on the first incident if it happens that close in time?
That investigation didn't come to us till after October 27th. I just don't remember when the incident dates were.
I understand. And look, I appreciate what you're telling me, but I also know that if Johnny, my hypothetical teenager, goes out and throws an egg through a window and the police pick him up and then they let him go and he's waiting to be charged and he goes throw an egg through another window, that the judge is going to know about that second egg and the action he takes on the first one. It's like y'all very cleverly put things in boxes so that nothing ever bleeds into one another, so you always get the most light result possible. And that doesn't happen to anybody else in the real world. That's just a fact. But anyway, we'll move on from that. So is York still employed with state police?
Yes, sir, as far as I know.
And Clary still employed with state police?
Yes, sir, as far as I know.
And none of them have been put on administrative leave? Do you think if DeMoss had been put on administrative leave, he wouldn't have had the second incident?
Again, the second incident may have occurred in a time frame where the Ronald Greene wasn't finalized, wasn't finished.
Sure, but if he'd been put on administrative leave pending the investigation,
I see what you're
probably
saying.
not committed the second one. I think that's fair to say, huh?
I see what you're saying. And I'm confusing. Our investigation was a year after the incident.
And I'm going to wrap up and turn it over to member of our committees, but I do have a couple more questions for you. Did you ever talk to Albert Paxton?
No, sir, I did not.
Anybody in the criminal investigation?
No, sir.
Y'all never say, make sure you have all the evidence. No, there's no comparing of evidence between the two investigations to make sure you got everything, he's got everything?
No, sir. Not in my time frame.
Is that by design?
It's not. No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. Deputy Superintendent, what was your role prior to assuming overseeing internal affairs?
So I was for 6 years, I was a lieutenant in the Bureau of Criminal Identification Information. That's criminal records, APHIS, CCH, concealed handguns. I was a lieutenant, got promoted to captain there for 2 years, and then was lateral to the internal affairs.
I do share Representative Marcel's concern. It does seem like there has been a lot of turnover in internal affairs. I don't know if that's a national best practice in policing. I'm not a law enforcement officer, but there seems to be a lack of stability at the top, from my perspective, of internal affairs, and that certainly concerns me. Tell me what the role of internal affairs is.
So the role is to investigate violations of policy on department personnel. Could be a trooper or it could be a civilian employee.
So when you saw the Clary video, did you see any violations of policy in that video?
Yes, and those were addressed in those individual troopers' cases.
What did you see? Can you share that?
Those I guess I could. I'm worried that those are still being used potentially for criminal charges.
Okay.
And because the administrative side of the House is a compelled statement and stuff like that.
Okay. That's fine. I certainly don't want to infringe on a criminal investigation, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'll let some of the lawyers press a little bit further, because that's not my background. Did you see excessive force in any of those videos?
So I think that would play into the administrative versus criminal realm.
Who besides you viewed the video, the Clary video? It appeared in September, right?
Yes, sir.
You said around September 2020. You saw the video. Who else saw the video?
Our internal affairs investigators.
Did Colonel Reeves see the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other top brass that you're aware saw the video?
Chief Brown would have. Major Kane would have. Outside of that, I'm not aware that anybody did.
It's my understanding from reading news reports, and maybe you can clarify this, somehow that video did not make it to the district attorney until around April 2021. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
It's around the same time you got a promotion, right?
I was promoted in April, yes, sir.
Okay. Why did it take so long for that video to make it to the district attorney?
From my perspective in internal affairs, not knowing what was or wasn't shared in the criminal case, and seeing that the videos were labeled correctly, that on the night of they were uploaded correctly, and the audit log did indicate a download, I didn't know that he didn't have it.
Whose responsibility was it to turn that over to the district attorney, or to make that call?
Originally we've been part of the criminal case, but the investigators, I believe, expressed they didn't have access to evidence.com. We had limited access. Those videos were restricted. We got the restriction lifted to let us download it and use it for our investigation.
Mr. Deputy Superintendent, I'm trying to remain calm.
Yes, sir.
I'm getting deeply frustrated the more I sit here, but I'm gonna attempt to maintain my calm and level of professionalism. I find it very vexing and perplexing, and I can only conjecture, based upon you saying that you don't want to infringe on a criminal investigation and other investigations, that there was some very disturbing things in that video. And I can't understand for the life of me why somebody in that agency didn't make the call to turn that video over to the district attorney in a timely fashion. And I have a very hard time understanding why individuals in state police are not communicating with each other. So can you help me connect the dots? Because I'm struggling.
No, sir. We used the video. We had the video, and it was part of our administrative investigation.
I'm still struggling to understand who would have made the call to turn these videos over to the district attorney. Was that a Colonel Reeves call? Was that your call? Who ultimately, who does the buck stop with?
I would say the colonel.
Okay. So after you viewed the video, what actions did you take?
We continued our investigation, and policy violations were found, and a report was submitted. Presentation to the disciplinary review committee was had, and discipline was vetted by the colonel appointing authority.
I noticed when Representative Marcel asked, do you make recommendations, or it may have been the chairman, somebody asked, do you make recommendations about disciplinary action? You said not historically. Is there anything that prohibits you from making recommendations regarding disciplinary action in your capacity over internal affairs?
Internal affairs does not make recommendations for
So
discipline.
you only produce the report, and then it's up to somebody else to
Yes, sir.
make that determination. All right. I'll yield to my colleagues. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. And I want to ask a couple of follow-ups some stuff I asked you. During this time period where you're doing the IA investigation, how often are you talking to Bob Brown, Doug Kane, Colonel Reeves?
Well, Doug Kane not. He wasn't in the command of internal affairs. Bob Brown and Kevin Reeves, not daily, not weekly, but update the case briefly. No real big specific details. 60 days is a very short amount of time to get everything done you need to get done, so we continued.
Let me ask you this. When you made the decision not to open up an IA investigation originally into Clary, did you vet that through Colonel Reeves or Bob Brown or anybody else making that decision?
No, sir.
Did they ever ask you about it?
No, sir.
Did they ever say, don't investigate him?
No, sir.
So you made that totally on your own?
Yes, sir.
When you meet with Tina on October 10th, did you take the thumb drive with you or did you leave it in the room?
I closed it out and took it with me.
Okay. Was it left on the server there or was it?
It's a thumb drive. I just removed it and.
Right, but to do that, sometimes the video could be moved onto the computer.
Oh,
which
no,
was,
sir.
It was,
No, sir.
No, okay. You have another, did you show the video later to the governor?
In a separate, close together meeting.
How long ago, how many days after was that?
It was days, maybe.
And
I don't have a specific day.
Who was in the room for that meeting?
I would say the governor, Matthew Block, Tina, the colonel, the chief.
And were you part of any discussions or did you just walk in and plug the video in and leave?
I stayed with the video to start and stop if they needed it or such, but it was show the video and then I was excused.
Was John Belton at that meeting?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
Were you in the meeting when John Belton was showing the videos?
So I recall showing the video to the family. I was the guy sitting at the table playing the video. It wasn't a presentation on my part, but D.A. Belton was the presenter of that meeting when the video was shown.
To the family?
Correct.
And was that the first time John Belton saw the video?
I don't know.
Or videos?
I don't know.
And you played the Clary video at that time?
I did, yes.
Okay. Go back to the governor's meeting, the second meeting in this trio of meetings. Were you there for any of the pre-discussion of the videos?
No, sir.
Were they already meeting when you came in?
I don't recall. It was similar situation where another afternoon call to come show the video, and I don't recall if I showed up and there were people there or not there.
Okay. And do you remember any discussion during the video? Did you stop it a lot? Did you play it a lot? I mean, what was going on?
Started and stopped. I would say yes, I did throughout. discussion, not a whole lot of discussion that I recall. Wasn't too many questions. I think Colonel Reeves kind of led the viewing or meeting, I guess you could say.
Did he show key points in the videos?
He might have pointed out a few things, but I don't recall specifics.
Did the governor ask questions?
He may have had a few, but again, I don't recall.
Yeah. How often do you meet with the governor?
Never.
So I can remember the first time I met with the governor, and I can tell you what suit he was wearing. I can tell you what the room was like. I can tell you his body posture. I can tell you things that were said. That was 6 years ago. Because literally I was like, holy smokes, I can't believe they let a 37-year-old in the room with the governor to talk about something. And it took me a moment to get over that. It's weird to me that you can't remember details of questions that were asked, stop points. I mean, it seems that this is a momentous event and you have no recollection of anything, really, other than you press play and stop.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When did Colonel Reeves first see the video?
I think it would have been after our download and after our administrative investigation started.
Okay, so when would that be?
After September
Did you contact him and say, hey man, I want to show you some videos, you need to see this? Did he contact you? Hey man, you got some videos? Like, give me something.
So we actually, our investigator created I'll call it a splice, where you could see the action in Clary's video and the video and audio in Clary's and the video view of DeMoss's kind of at the same time in the same moment in time. And the Clary video, like I said, he arrived after the arrest was made, after the handcuffs were placed. And he, walks around, and what you have from the Clary video is the audio on the scene. And what you see is a different perspective from the DeMoss video. To your question of when did the colonel see that, it would have been at some point after. It might have been at the meeting with the governor's staff.
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again, when?
It might have been, I don't know when he first saw the video, but it may have been at one of those meetings.
Okay. You testified a few moments ago that Colonel Reeves led the presentation to the governor showing points. I'm assuming then he had to review the video with you to know what was of interest before he had that to prepare him to have said meeting. Is that incorrect?
Well, there was viewing in 2019. Some video was reviewed. I don't know what that was.
Okay. At what point were you aware that Colonel Reeves, when you started the IA investigation, had he seen the John Clary video already? Or did he see it after you started the IA investigation?
At the time, I didn't know if he had seen it before then or not.
Did you have any discussions with either Bob Brown or Colonel Reeves about the Clary video leading up to showing it to the governor?
I'm sure there was. I don't recall.
Did you go over what the video showed with Colonel Reeves? Did y'all have discussions about the incident?
No, sir.
Okay. So, Colonel Reeves gave you no instruction. Y'all never talked about it. You're in charge of IA. You are what seems to be the gatekeeper of these videos. They call you in to bring them in on a thumb drive, and you'll have no discussions with the man about what's going to be presented to the governor, Y'all have no meetings, pre-meetings where y'all go deep dive into what happened, what IA believes happened, discussion. All of it is you just show up a day before, plug it in, and he kind of wings it. I'm really not. I'm having a hard time. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm really having a hard time trying to understand what took place, and I don't provide. You're not providing any information whatsoever, and I can't help but feel like it's intentional.
I'm sorry. I don't know what.
Okay, how many times were you in charge in your time period of IA? Did somebody die in police custody that you investigated for the 1 year you talked about?
None.
One, just the one?
One, yes.
Okay. So this is an unusual event in your IA investigation history. Now, let me ask you a question. When I started reviewing Colonel Reeves' journal, I noticed he had lots of discussions about internal affairs investigations and disciplinary review council. He has a little shorthand for it at the top of his page. It's called DRC. This is why I wanted the whole journal so I could see how he handled everything. Mm-hmm. And even things as small as inappropriate behavior by a trooper, Colonel Reeves knew about, had conversations about, and was involved in. And you're telling me that in the one time that somebody died, you had very little discussion leading up to meeting with the ultimate boss of state police and the governor of Louisiana.
And I'm not telling you there wasn't discussion. I just don't recall what was discussed. We were still investigating. I was asked to show the videos that resulted from the investigation, and
okay. According to the audit trail, you said it was restricted. It doesn't appear to have restricted access, not until much later. And I think testimony has been very clear that lots of people had access to these videos.
So initially when a video was uploaded, it's accessible to anybody and everybody. At some point, it can be restricted, and then access would have to be given to access it.
When was it restricted during your IA investigation?
So I believe I recall that they were restricted at our investigation time frame.
Okay.
And we would have had to request access to get them and pull them.
Okay. So, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm going to beat it because it's really frustrating me. You cannot pinpoint for this committee when you first saw or first talked with Colonel Reeves about the videos in time.
I cannot, no, sir.
You cannot inform the committee about any discussion, any impressions he had at all?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm turning to Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, or Colonel, I know it's obvious that you're a little reluctant to answer some questions, and you're citing, concerns about perhaps internal policies with LSP about discussing these things. Is that fair?
More so the difference between an administrative compelled case as opposed to a criminal case.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would ask Colonel Davis to come to the table for a moment. Mr. Acting Chair.
Colonel's here. So,
Lieutenant Colonel, just please sit. Colonel Davis, of course, I need to introduce yourself. I'll have one or two questions for you.
Yes, sir. Colonel Lamar Davis, Colonel of State Police, Deputy Secretary of Department of Public Safety.
Colonel Davis, I would ask that we clarify, and perhaps our witness needs this clarity as well. As we've gone forward, in this investigation, you've always said we're going to be open with anything that we have to testify to, and I think that perhaps Lieutenant Colonel Eskew, maybe perhaps if you would say it's okay to answer all these questions, even though, you know, there's a criminal investigation going on, and as his colonel, I think you have the authority to do so. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. I am authorizing Lieutenant Colonel Eskew to answer your questions.
Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Eskew, now I'll ask some of the questions again now that you have permission. Okay. As you reviewed the incident, did and the eventual sustainment of complaints, and you said policy violations. What were the policy violations?
So I don't have the list in front of me, Representative Bacala, but I remember use of force was Chris Hollingsworth, and again, I don't have the list in front of me.
Would you say that use of force or excessive force would be issues with all three?
I would say for sure for sure Chris Hollingsworth and Corey York.
Okay, so there were, you say use of force, but that is, in fact, use of force could be, using force is not a policy violation. Using excessive force is a policy violation, correct?
Yes, I'm just listing the policy.
I got you. Okay, so do you recall the other issues that perhaps were part of the sustainment of the complaints?
So I believe there was body-worn camera issues. I don't remember with which employee. Performance
being what? A little more description.
I don't have the case with me, sir.
All right. Is duty to intervene any within that policy at all? That perhaps would that be a policy that you had or a policy violation that was noted?
So that is more of a delineated policy currently, and it was not in effect at.
It was not in effect. Okay. Okay, now we'll come back to that later, but I wanted to get out of the way your permission to answer all questions without reservation regarding criminal versus IA, and I thank you, Colonel Davis, for allowing that to proceed. You mentioned that the investigation was initiated, or you were contacted, and the investigation was via email, correct?
That's correct.
Were there any other emails, text messages, or anything else that is, we still have access to or could have access to that were exchanged between you and anyone else regarding this?
I have, in my role, I'm sure, emails. If you don't have them, I'll be glad to provide whatever.
Please, I think that, and that would be from your first meeting or whatever, from this first email through today. I mean, anything else that may be relative to this investigation, any emails, text messages, or anything along those lines. Among those emails, are there anything that are notable that you recall that might have been you transmitting information to someone else or someone else transmitting to you? Is there anything that you can recall that may be important for this committee?
No, sir.
Would you venture a guess to say that there were regular emails, irregular emails, 2 emails, 10 emails? Can you just, or text messages as well?
It would be a small number of emails.
And who would the communication be between, you and who?
So the investigation request was from Chief Brown. That's one email.
Right.
I don't recall any other back and forth emails regarding the investigation with either himself or Colonel Reeves. There was some future emails about FBI subpoena for records related to the investigation, whether it be case reports, body-worn camera, evidence. I have some emails back and forth with legal, Office of Legal Affairs, Faye Morrison, who was answering those subpoena requests, and then from periodically through the fall, there was an FBI agent that was kind of leading the, I don't know if he was the investigator or what, was leading the gathering of information. So there were some back and forth emails with that. I remember in October 20th time frame, there was an email from DA Belton, which was which had a letter attached from the U.S. Attorney, which indicated that videos, evidence not be shared because they were conducting their own investigation.
Okay, and I'm going to back up just a little bit. I was just provided the sustained. I think, let's see which one's which. Okay, for Trooper York, it looks like sustained use of force, not sustained use of taser, sustained courtesy, sustained treatment of prisoners in custody, sustained body-worn cameras and in-car camera system, and sustained conduct unbecoming an officer. Let's go through those one at a time. So in regards to Trooper York, the use of force sustained would indicate that you guys concluded there was excessive force.
Yes, sir.
Courtesy, treatment of prisoners in custody would indicate what?
I believe that would have been related to the leg shackle pull.
Leg shackle pull.
Yes.
Body-worn camera and in-car camera systems sustained relative to York. What would that be regarding?
So he actually, en route to the scene, deactivated his in-car and body cam.
Conduct unbecoming an officer. What would that indicate?
That would have been kind of his words, his activity in relation to Mr. Greene.
Okay. In regards to Trooper DeMoss, use of force, it says exonerated. So you guys determined that there was no excessive use of force by DeMoss.
Yes.
In regards to use of taser, not sustained, which would indicate, I mean, there's a difference between exonerated and not sustained, obviously, right?
Yes, sir.
Explain that difference, please.
So with DeMoss, during the arrest, there were no I think he may have struck Mr. Greene on the side with his portable, the hand that he was holding his portable with, but it was not a hard blow. He, in fact, I think it was Hollingsworth that tased him first, and that went through several cycles, and there's a part of our training that says you can't initiate a new cycle after 5 times. After 5 times, so I think DeMoss realized that and said, we can't tase him again. So I believe that's the taser reference.
Okay. Courtesy and body-worn cameras, I guess the same thing as you stated earlier.
Yes, sir.
Now, also the investigative files, I have these that have been provided. I understand that the Clary determinations are sealed and not available to us, and the Hollingsworth are sealed and not available to us. You don't know that.
I don't know
Okay.
that, sir.
Okay, so those are missing components, but obviously we know Hollingsworth was fired, so I think there's a logical assumption, and given that you've been given permission, I think you would probably recall that what might be the reasons that he was ultimately fired.
So Hollingsworth, it would have probably been the use of force.
Excessive force.
Yes, sir. And he also had a separate case for some body-worn camera issues that coincided at the same time that we investigated at the same time.
Right.
That was part of that whole disciplinary process.
So, in individually, the determinations vary a little bit, but generally speaking, excessive force was probably the primary I'll say policy violation, could use that term. That was the most serious of the allegations which were investigated and sustained.
Yes, sir.
And I think that as we go forward, looking at the fact that we would have to combine your testimony with that of the pathologist. But I think it's obvious that the excessive force led to the death. I think we could draw that conclusion, which would also draw the conclusion that the excessive force was criminal. I don't know if that you will nod your head or not nod your head, but I think that's a logical progression. Okay, let's go to a few other things. The response was what degree of resistance did you see from Mr. Greene?
I would say light.
So again, very light resistance to the arrest and excessive force, correct? That's kind of what, generally speaking, what you saw. Obviously, it's not excessive use of force if it's the force only necessary to overcome the resistance.
Yes.
Okay. You were directed to investigate or directed to look at the information and determine whether investigation was warranted? Just to be clear on that.
It was worded investigate.
I'm sorry?
It was worded investigate.
So you were told to investigate before, so someone else had already been privy to, looked at, reviewed the information and evidence in the case and determined that the investigation was warranted. So it wasn't just, you weren't determining whether to investigate, you were assigned to investigate.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You've given quite a few names of people. I want to make sure we don't skip anybody. I think you've testified that the video was shown at various times in your presence to Ms. Vanichakorn and Mr. Block with the governor's staff, as well as the governor. In your presence, it was shown to the family of Mr. Greene, and in your presence, it was shown to, I guess, Colonel Reeves and others within your chain of command. Is there anyone else outside of LSP, well, that first way, outside of LSP, who viewed the videos in your presence? Mr. Belton too, I guess, but anybody else that hasn't been named today?
No, sir.
Okay. In your presence, or you're aware, I'm sure that the investigators that were assigned to the case viewed the video, or is there anybody else within LSP that have not been previously named in this testimony that you are aware that viewed the videos?
So it would have been whoever was assigned to internal affairs at that time. I'm sure they saw the video and viewed the videos.
All right.
As part of our internal affairs investigation.
The first time that you showed the video to the governor's staff, Ms. Vanichakorn, you testified it was on the second floor of LSP. I don't recall the date. Was there a reaction to the video?
I would describe all of those people as shocked and disturbed.
Okay, and would that be by the look on their faces or by the comments that they spoke?
Again, I testified, and I really don't recall any specific comments.
Right. Can you testify as to a general your takeaway from what the comments? Obviously, you said you don't remember specific comments, but it's not like you recall them. Everybody sitting silently, and you testify that there was a general shock. So, generally speaking, describe the comments in general that you heard.
I don't recall specific comments.
No, not specific. I'm saying generally speaking, what was the commentary? Was there what are we going to do now? What do we need to do next? This is so horrible. Can you give me a general feel? And I'm not asking you to remember quotes or quote anybody, but just in the room, what was the takeaway and what was the go forward?
And I wasn't
within your earshot. I'm not talking about when you weren't there. You were there when the videos were shown. I can tell you that if the members of this committee sat in a room and viewed the video, we would not be silent. And I can't imagine any group of more than one person sitting in the room and being silent, and they may be talking to themselves. So generally speaking, what was the nature of the comments as the video is unfolding.
And I would liken it to a general shock and disturbed outcome.
Okay. And that would be both the meeting where Ms. Vanichkorn saw the video and later when she was joined in a second viewing by Mr. Block and the governor.
Yes, sir.
Was there any cursing?
No, sir.
I mean, I'm just trying to say anything. I mean, there had to be a sense of conveyed through communication that what do we do now, or how did this get away from us or something? Nothing?
No, sir. I wasn't
All right.
in the room if that was discussed.
Okay, and I think the first meeting that you had in this matter with the videos was, and I'd go back to my notes, but it was a meeting with you and Colonel Reeves and whatever the staff, and you said you showed the videos and then you were dismissed, I guess. I don't mean that in a disparaging way.
Yes, sir.
Was your impression that you were dismissed so that conversation could continue about the matter? Or do you think you were dismissed because nobody wanted to talk about it anymore?
No, I didn't get the impression I was dismissed for either. I didn't feel I was dismissed so they could talk. I didn't feel I was dismissed because they had nothing further to say.
Okay. I'll be back in a second. Just hold on, Denise. Okay. You mentioned that in 2019 there was some viewing of the. I think that's a quote. In 2019 there was some viewing of the video. What? Can you tell me a little bit more about that statement that you made?
And the only personal reference I have to that, I was not in internal affairs at the time. I was not privy to any of those conversations, but the audit log does, outside of showing it was uploaded, then downloaded and labeled correctly, and I'm speaking kind of globally on behalf of all the videos involved, that it would have went through a use of force review process. I saw Scott Davis's name on it, but again, I don't know anything other than what I saw in the audit log.
Okay, so your reference to in 2019 there was some viewing. When you make that statement, that's just based on the audit logs.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll make one more. This is more of a commentary than a question. You were able, as an IA unit, to within 60 days determine that excessive force had been employed, as well as other policy violations that ultimately led someone to suspend 2 officers and fire a 3rd. You were able to do that within 60 days. If the IA had started in May of 2019, in 60 days, you could have made a determination that people needed to be suspended and or fired, correct? There was nothing new that wasn't at your fingertips or at LSP's fingertips in 2019.
I would agree with that.
And the fact that police officers, and one in particular who was fired, were able to continue in their employment and in their enforcement duties from 2019 all the way through the ultimate sustainments, was basically allowed to happen because the IA was not initiated soon enough, correct?
Yes, sir. And I would add to that, the practice of the department at the time was to await the criminal side.
That was my next question. Is that practice in policy?
I don't think that it is, no, sir.
So it was not a policy decision. It wasn't following policy that prevented the IA or kept the IA from being initiated timely. It was instead what? I mean, just a personal decision by somebody that we're not going to start the IA? If it isn't in policy, it's somebody's decision outside of policy, or not that is not relative to policy.
Ultimately, I would say that rests with the superintendent or the chief of staff.
So the superintendent or the chief of staff, you think, made a conscious decision not to initiate an IA investigation timely to the death of Mr. Greene?
I would say at the time they were following the protocol that was always followed of awaiting the criminal action or not action to be finalized.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, I know SOPs, standard operating procedures, are established when you frequently have things. I mean, I think it's a rare occasion for, it's hard to draw an SOP to an incident when I don't think criminal investigation of troopers happen except in a blue moon. So you're saying they're following an SOP. All right, tell me the last time you had troopers under investigation, criminal investigation, relative to the death of someone that would have established an SOP going into this, if you are aware of any.
I'm not, no, sir.
Or any criminal investigation of a trooper that would have been of such frequency, such as to establish an SOP.
I personally don't have that.
Okay, so when we say that was kind of the standard operating procedure, from when? The 60s or the 70s? I mean, that would obviously predate, I'm guessing, anybody who was in office at the time. That's a comment. You don't have to,
Yes.
unless you have some response. All right. Okay, I think I'll come back in a little while, but that'll do it for now. Thank you for answering the questions, and thank you for Colonel Davis, for allowing the questions to be answered.
All right. Thank you, Representative Bacala. Just a couple of questions for you right quick before we move on to, I'm going to be very brief. So let me ask you, just for clarification, when was this IA investigation opened?
August the 25th of 2020.
Of 2020.
Yes, sir.
So I'm looking right here in Colonel Reeves's journal notes, and May 22nd of 2019, he has here open IA investigation. Tell me what happened between May of 19 and August of 20. During that, I mean, it's over a year. Why didn't that happen?
I don't know, sir.
All right. So if Colonel is thinking about it, who's in your direct chain of custody, supervision? It's right above you. Who's above you?
Internal Affairs?
Yes.
So it would be Chief of Staff and Colonel,
Right.
whoever the Colonel is.
So the only person between you and the Colonel was the Chief of Staff, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. We'll go to Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. With all due respect, Deputy Superintendent, your recall of past events hasn't been particularly impressive, so let's see if you can recall some more recent events. Who did you meet with in preparation for your testimony today?
No one.
Who did you talk to in preparation for your testimony today?
I didn't talk to anyone to prepare.
Who did you talk to about the Ronald Greene incident most recently before your testimony today?
No one.
Okay, so how did you learn that you would be testifying today?
I got a notification yesterday in our senior command meeting from the Colonel that my presence was requested. And then I got an email later from Ms. Gale saying a forward of the request.
Okay, so the only conversations or communications, let's use communications, and you understand when I say communications, I'm talking very broadly, whether it's in person, whether it's email, text, phone call, etc. So it is your testimony today under oath that the only communication you have had with anyone and anticipation of your testimony today was notification yesterday that you would be speaking to the committee.
Yes, ma'am.
What about last week? Did you have any conversations with anyone about the Ronald Greene incident?
No, ma'am.
So when Mr. Block sent his rant dated May 26, 2022 to me with a footnote regarding you He didn't discuss that with you, or no one discussed that with you before he put that in this letter? Do you want me to read you the footnote? Would that help? Do you think that would help?
Yes, ma'am.
It says Lieutenant Colonel Chris Eskew, who at the time was head of internal affairs and who showed the videos to the governor, which, by the way, this letter, I thank Mr. Block for this letter. This is the first time I was ever aware, and I think I can say any committee member was ever aware that that video was shown to the governor back in October of 2020. But it says, and who showed the videos to the governor, his staff, and to the Greene family members, has confirmed this timeline in response to media inquiries and is able to provide the same information to the select committee. So let's try this line of questioning again, Deputy Superintendent. In terms of last week or this week, and your testimony today, who did you have communications with regarding your knowledge of the Ronald Greene incident or the investigation or the timeline or anything?
So I took your question to mean, who did I talk to prepare for my testimony?
Of course you did. So go ahead. Now that I explained to you what I'm looking for, let's see if we can try it again.
Yeah, so Matthew Block did notify me that my name was going to be in that letter, but he didn't say anything other than that. It was just a notification.
So when he says has confirmed the timeline in response to media inquiries, it's your testimony that Mr. Block just assumed you would confirm the timeline and he didn't discuss that with you? How did Mr. Block know when he wrote this letter that you confirmed the timeline?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you review any documents before today?
I did, yes, ma'am.
And what documents did you review? And just to be clear, in case I'm not clear enough, I want to know every document you reviewed before today.
Okay, so I looked at the audit logs, the video audit logs, and I had to go to IA to do that. And I also looked at through my emails.
And you looked at the video audit logs for what purpose?
To determine specifically when the video was downloaded for internal affairs purposes.
And then in terms of your emails, what emails were you referring to?
I was referring to the email asking for the investigation. Any and all emails, but specifically what popped up was the request for the investigation. There were some, like I said, going back and forth with the federal providing of documents for the investigations, those emails. And that DA Belton email related to the federal ask that the videos and reports not be released.
Not be released to the media, I'm assuming. Certainly they didn't mean don't release the Clary video to the federal prosecutors, correct?
No, those were...
Sure.
Those
Just
were,
want to be clear for anyone who's watching and may be confused.
those were always part of our investigation and anything we provided to the feds.
Come back on that. So you're telling me the Clary video was provided to the feds by Internal Affairs?
As part of that subpoena, yes.
And when was that?
October timeframe,
October of what?
2020.
So it's your testimony, as you sit here today, that the Lieutenant Clary video was turned over by IA to the federal prosecutors back in October of 2020?
So those emails go back and forth. There were some, the agent that I mentioned earlier noted some Garrity review process, and he didn't necessarily know if he got everything, so he asked a few times, and that back and forth finalized in March, April of 2021, and that's the emails that I'm referring to.
March or April of 2021.
Correct.
Okay, because unless I don't know how to read or comprehend and I'm pretty sure I know how to do both. I believe that the AP article this past weekend indicated that video, the Lieutenant Clary video, had not been turned over to the federal prosecutors until sometime around April of 2021. Do you have anything that evidences something differently?
So those back and forth emails talk about a request multiple times, and he even indicates that he's not always aware with the Garrity process that happens in DC of what he has until way later. But there are emails back and forth throughout the fall, and then in the spring of 2021 is the final email where he acknowledges receipt of the things he acknowledged.
So it's sort of a simple question, Deputy Superintendent. My question to you is, do you have any evidence to show that the state police turned over to federal prosecutors the Lieutenant Clary video before April of 2021?
Other than those emails back and forth, I don't.
Do those emails back and forth refer to a Lieutenant Clary video?
I believe they do.
Okay. Do you have those have those emails been provided to us?
I would hope so. I think so.
And those emails are from you to the federal prosecutor?
So it's between myself, Faye Morrison of Legal Affairs, and the agent.
Okay. And that agent would be whom?
Glenn Methvin, I think
Okay.
it is.
I will follow up to make sure that we have those particular emails. Now, I noticed that you remembered specific actions about the troopers, but you don't seem to remember whether you had a conversation with the Colonel Reeves, about anything. Do I have that about right?
I remember specifics about the investigation. I'm sure I talked to Colonel Reeves, but I don't know.
You just don't remember what y'all talked about for the one in custody death that happened under your IA command?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, I do recall you indicating that the Lieutenant Clary video was labeled correctly. I found that an interesting statement. Do you recall specifically how the Lieutenant Clary video was labeled?
I don't, but he had multiple, and they were all labeled the same.
Okay. So when you say they were labeled correctly, but you don't remember how they were labeled, tell me about that. How do you come to the conclusion that they were labeled correctly?
When I say labeled correctly, they indicate what policy says they should indicate: location, subject involved.
Oh, and according to you, Lieutenant Clary, and again, maybe I can't read. I don't recall. Is it your recollection that Lieutenant Clary's labeling included the subject involved being Ronald Greene?
I thought, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I seem to remember his labeling just talked about a pursuit either in Washita Parish or Union Parish, which was distinct and different from the way other officers labeled their videos. And I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. I just don't think I'm wrong. So your recollection is that he labeled his video and downloaded it with the name Ronald Greene.
I cannot contest what you're saying.
Okay. But you can say that the standard would have been to indicate the subject in the labeling. Would it not have been?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I think you also testified, I don't know whether you were talking about DeMoss or York, that something about not a hard blow to his head, meaning Ronald Greene's head. Did I understand you correctly?
No, ma'am. I was referring to DeMoss, and he was holding his portable at the time, and it was to
The portable is
radio.
okay.
Torso.
Okay. And he hit him in his torso? You didn't say anything about a blow to the head?
No, ma'am.
Because you're familiar, certainly in your IA investigation, you would be familiar with the autopsy findings relative to blunt trauma to the head inconsistent with a car accident, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you take that into consideration in terms of your IA investigation and recommendations?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, setting aside the Clary video for a moment, as former commander of IA, have you ever reviewed a matter for purposes of sustaining a failure of duty to intervene complaint?
No, ma'am.
And Lieutenant Clary is still with State Police, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, yes, ma'am.
Had there ever been a time in any other investigation that you've been involved in where you had a meeting like you had with the governor?
No, ma'am.
Now, were you made aware of complaints by the criminal investigators that they were told Lieutenant Clary that they didn't have the Lieutenant Clary video, or that they were told Lieutenant Clary didn't have a video? Are you aware of that?
I am now, but I was not at the time
And when did you become aware of that?
when this inquiry started.
So from the committee, from testimony in committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that what you're referring to? Okay. Now, to be clear, the governor saw the Lieutenant Clary video in October 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's according to you, and that's according to Mr. Block's recent letter to me. Is he one of the ones you would say from facial expressions appeared shocked and disturbed?
I was not. I would say so. That is my recollection of the mood of the room. I didn't really note facial expressions.
You didn't note. Okay, so you didn't note facial expressions. You just picked, and you don't recall conversations. But you picked up the mood of the room as being shocked and disturbed. Tell me what that means. If words aren't spoken and you didn't note facial expressions, where did you come to the conclusion that there were individuals shocked and disturbed? Just curious.
I don't know how to tell you how I came to that conclusion, but that's what I left with.
Okay. Are you aware of anything that would have prevented the governor or his staff from talking to prosecutors about the video and what they observed in the video? Are you aware of anything that would have prevented them from doing that?
No, ma'am.
I yield.
Thank you, Representative Villio. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I think Representative Video asked one of the questions, but let me go back to something you said right after you talked about the wasn't a hard blow. Somebody asked, I guess it was Representative Bacala that asked you about, or somebody asked about the resistance of Ronald Greene, and you said that there was light resistance. Is that to imply that there was resistance? Because I will tell you, I saw the video. I didn't necessarily see any resistance.
Yes, from what I saw in the video, they were having trouble securing his hands in handcuffs. That to me would indicate some type of resistance.
Could it be the position that they had him in? Could it be something else versus resistance? But I tell you what, I'll come back to that. You said earlier that the Clary video, I think when you observed it, you said it didn't have any evidentiary value. Is that?
No, sir, I didn't say that.
So why wasn't he a target? I guess after watching his video initially.
Because from what we saw in our evidence gathering, the videos were uploaded properly. They were there. Clary's video gave more view and audio from the scene than any action that Clary took or didn't take.
All right. What's your and someone said that you and Officer Kane went through the academy together?
That's correct.
All right. So what's your relationship with Doug Kane? Or what has it been over the years?
Doug Kane is a real good friend of mine.
All right. What's your relationship, or what was your relationship with Bob Brown?
I didn't know Bob Brown at all, other than him being in state police until he was named chief of staff and became my kind of first line supervisor.
Well, what was your relationship with him as your first line supervisor?
Fine. I didn't have any issues.
All right. And you said that during this Ronald Greene incident, is it your testimony to us that you never had any conversations with Bob Brown related to the videos?
I don't recall any.
Did Bob Brown see the video?
I would think that he did, yes.
Did you ever discuss with him his impression of the videos?
No, sir. During our investigation, the videos were out except for the Clary video, and that's what we used that video with our investigation to, you know, paint a total picture of the scene. But I don't recall any conversation with the Chief Brown.
So he's your immediate supervisor. He's the one who tells you to undertake the investigation, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're telling me, and you know that at some point he watched the video, and you guys don't have a conversation at all about the video or your impressions of the video versus his impressions of the video, or talking about the officers or any of that stuff?
No, sir.
What was Bob Brown's feelings on the way that the case was being handled? Did he ever discuss that with you?
No, not specific to our case. He doesn't give any opinion to me.
What was your case about how the case was being handled? Were you satisfied that it was moving along properly?
The administrative case?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with any of the conversations that the command staff had about the Greene matter at the time?
In general?
Yeah.
Or as
In
part of a DRC?
Both.
Yeah. In general, no, sir. I did not have any interaction with that. In the disciplinary review committee, there was conversation about the whole case, and obviously discipline was vetted out from those violations that resulted from the administrative investigation. And it's a conversation amongst all of the people there.
What was that conversation? I mean, what was said?
A whole lot of stuff.
Well, let's start. Look, we're gonna eat this elephant one bite at a time. So let's start with it.
Okay. Well, in the DRC process, the senior command staff is there to include the colonel, the chief of staff, the deputy superintendents, and the major over the person involved, and the captain of the person involved. And typically, conversation starts with the captain, and they concur or not with the violations, the sustained violations, and then recommend what they recommend. And it happens with each person around the table, and the colonel decides what to do disciplinary wise.
So in those conversations, did any of the command staff, did they say, like, you know, this is awful but lawful, or this is atrocious, or, you know, this was beyond the pale? Or, I mean, so what exactly were the impressions? What did they say?
So I don't have specific recollection of the conversation, but the sustained violations against Hollingsworth were all agreed with and all concurred, and their recommendation was termination. And then for the other cases, I believe it was York, there were some sustainments that were, some policies that were combined, and then ultimately the decision for whatever discipline is vetted lies with the colonel, and that's how those were finalized.
All right. You mentioned Scott Davis earlier. Did you meet with Scott Davis at all at some point during the investigation?
So during our investigation, we had access to Scott, and he gave us opinions on force, and that helps us with sustaining or not sustaining or exonerating, the finding of the case.
All right. Did he express his opinions to you?
Yes.
All right. At any point, did you ever try to convince him to change his interpretation of the video or what he saw?
No, sir.
That didn't happen.
No, sir.
So if he said that you did, you would disagree with that.
I would.
All right. Were you in IA when the Jacob Brown video came to light?
Yes, sir.
All right. What recommendations did you make about the Brown case?
Recommendations.
Did you make any recommendations about Jacob Brown? About what should happen?
It was given to us we were asked to investigate it, and we did. Did I make any recommendations? No.
Okay. Why wasn't he placed on leave?
I don't know.
Whose decision would that have been?
The colonel.
Colonel Reeves.
Correct.
And the second in command at the time was still Bob Brown?
I'm thinking so, yes, sir.
All right. I'm gonna come back to that for a second. Let's go back through the video. When you saw Ronald Greene, when he was ultimately stopped and he had his hands up, right? Was that any form of resistance?
No, sir.
All right. When they tased him like 2 to 3 seconds afterwards, well, I mean, in your opinion, was that proper procedure?
No, sir.
When they dragged him out the car and they were cursing him, was that part of your policy?
No, sir.
When he would appear to be struck in the head several times with an object, which I believe to be a flashlight, but who knows? Was that proper?
No, sir.
To have a man hog-tied and dragged, was that part of the procedure?
No, sir.
We've got all these violations, but you're saying you didn't see anything that was criminal.
So fast forward to this point, I was resistant to answer those questions earlier, but yes, I would agree.
You'd agree that it was criminal?
Yes, sir.
All right, because I will tell you, being an over IA, I'm assuming that's a leadership position.
Yes, sir.
And so I'm going to assume that you are a leader. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, sir.
All right. But I will tell you, and I think this is the difficulty for me and maybe some of the other colleagues that we have on the panel here, is I believe in the training to a certain extent that you guys receive. I don't believe that you got into a leadership position just by happenstance. But I will tell you, most of your testimony today has not been someone expressive of a leader. it's been sort of weak, to be very honest with you. Look, the only person I really know on this panel in law enforcement, well, I think he probably is the only one, is Representative Bacala. Now, I know Representative Bacala was in leadership, and I can tell you the way he conducts himself within this body, I can see that. I can make the correlation. I can see where his leadership skills have transferred from Central Parish Sheriff's Office to this body. I don't always agree with him, but I can see where the leadership skills transfer. I'm just telling you, I don't get that vibe today. And so to me, it seems disingenuous, because I gotta believe that you are a leader and you're there, but for some reason you're suppressing that. In my opinion, you're suppressing that today, and I just, I'm bewildered by it. But I do appreciate you saying now that you do find those things criminal. We'll go back to Jacob Brown. Did you ever suggest to him, to the colonel, that Brown be arrested?
I don't know if I did or didn't.
Hold on, stop. Time out for a second. And that goes to my point. We're not talking about just any trooper. We're talking about the son of your direct supervisor. And you're telling me you don't recall whether or not you made a suggestion of whether he be arrested or not. I find that unbelievable. And I'm just saying that if this is somebody that's your direct supervisor, you understand the implications of what decision you're going to make and the recommendations that you make. And it's not like, again, it's not like Trooper, 257. This is the son of. There's no way you're going to make me believe, I'm just not going to stand here or sit here and have that just go uncontradicted. In that context, you're telling me that you don't recall whether or not you made a recommendation to have your supervisor's son arrested.
No.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been under an IA investigation yourself?
I have, yes, sir.
All right. How recently?
It was 1999.
All right. Was it sustained?
It was, yes, sir.
All right. What was it for, since it was sustained?
Look, I don't think we need to get into his own personal history. I don't think.
Well, if he tells me if it's excessive force or something like that, I'd find it very relevant.
I don't think it's for excessive force.
All right. Well, I'll just ask.
It is not.
All right.
Excessive force.
All right.
You can clarify. I don't think it's relevant. I don't think we need to go into it.
I appreciate you, but I will say that I did make a mistake in 1999. Investigation was conducted. Sustained violation was had. I got 44 hours off. I took my discipline and moved on and got better.
I appreciate that. I would again, I'm going to tell you, I just find it. I'm going to go with Representative Hughes. I'm not necessarily at the point of frustration, but I am at the point of just because the pattern I see and what disturbs me about whether it's been you or Officer Oliphant or Doug Kane or Colonel Reeves, there's been this pattern of trying to skirt the truth a little bit, in my opinion. And the thing that disturbs me so much about this is when you guys are in a court of law, the testimony you give while it should be taken on face value, the very fact that you wear that uniform, people take what you say as the absolute truth. And this process in this committee has just shined a light that gives some doubt to that. And I just hope it's not more widespread than the people who have testified before us. Because if it is, we have a huge problem out there. And again, I know I'm questioning your credibility, and it's not always easy to do that. I find myself in a difficult situation to do that, but there are certain scenarios that we play out that just defy logic to me. Maybe I'm the illogical one, but I don't think so. And so when you guys do that, I'm only left with the fact to say that somehow you guys are being less than honest with us. But I'm going to yield at this point, and I may come back later. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Representative Nelson.
Thank you. Unlike my colleagues, I will actually be brief. We say that in the legislature all the time, and that normally means it's going to go for 2 hours. So the first question I have is, you said you talked about this a little bit, and some other people have talked about it too. Could you tell us the reason why the IA investigation was started in August of 2020?
I don't know why.
So you never gave you a reason? I think you had said that you were told the criminal investigation that no charges were going to be brought, and that was why it went till then.
So, yes, the DA had indicated that, he was done with it at the time, and I believe that time frame was when a lot of public interest came about, and I don't know what made the decision to proceed with the administrative investigation, but it came August the 25th.
And so was that information relayed to you by, it wasn't the DA that told you, was Bob Brown the guy that asked you to do it? He said, did he tell you that, or was that?
That's just me looking back to then.
So you think it was the DA, but your understanding at the time was that DA Belton had said he wasn't going to press charges, or he was no longer considering charges. Is that correct?
What I recall is that the criminal investigators indicated that the DA was done with it at the time.
What criminal investigators?
That was Lieutenant Johnny Scott Brown, I think.
Okay. Had said that the DA had told him that he was no longer considering charges, and that's what instigated the IA investigation could go forward?
I would assume so, yes. Sir.
Okay. And so is it typical, I think some of my colleagues have talked about this a little bit, but was it typical that when troopers are under criminal investigation that they would be continued to stay on the job?
Typical, I would say no.
No, yeah. So that's one of the things that I think is striking to me is that I understand there's different levels of you can compel testimony with the IA investigation, but I would think that if you're under criminal investigation, delaying for 18 months, you would say that seems kind of unreasonable standard procedure or something like that, right?
Yes, sir.
What about when DA Belton? It was our understanding, and I think Representative Villa, we were all kind of under the understanding up until recently that DA Belton never seen the video, the family had never seen the Clary video specifically. But I think you said earlier that DA Belton was the one who presented the video to the family. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so he presented, including the Clary video, to the family in whenever it's September or October.
I recall that being a part of the presentation.
Okay, and DA Belton presented that video to the family at the time, correct?
Correct.
And then the final question is, has anyone ever asked you to not share any of the information that you've learned in this Ronald Greene investigation with anybody else?
Other than the request from the federal investigation?
Yes.
To not share information, no one else has asked that.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd asked you some questions early on, and I think since then you came back and said you did feel like the actions that you saw were criminal. I think you say, I don't know, you say you were reluctant.
Yeah, at
to
first,
answer those?
At first, before the colonel came up, I was reluctant to mesh or mix the administrative and criminal cases.
Okay, so I know you understand what being under oath means, right?
Ma'am.
When you're under oath, you're to tell the truth regardless of whatever else is going on. Do you believe that, unless somebody has ordered you not to speak on an issue? Did anybody order you not to speak
No,
on
ma'am.
this issue?
No, ma'am.
So I'm just a little blown away by you saying you were reluctant because you're under oath.
Right.
And we're expecting and anticipating that you will be telling us the truth, as Representative Jordan talked about. When we see the uniform and you go on the stand in court, right, we're expecting that you're going to lay out what is true to the best of your knowledge and information and belief. And so to come in here today and say that you were reluctant because, and nobody told you that, is problematic for many of us up here. Let me just say that. So I'm at least glad that you did say that some of the stuff was criminal. And let me just ask a couple more questions. You talked about the blow to Ronald Greene's head wasn't hard, I think you said. It wasn't hard?
I was referring to a blow to his torso.
Torso.
Not his head.
So the blow was to his torso. Did you see any blows to his head?
Yes.
You did. So how do you assess, looking at the video, how hard the blow was to his torso? How do you assess that? Help me with that.
Just viewing it.
Just viewing it.
Yes, ma'am.
So regardless of whether it was hard or not, do you know if I come up there and slap you, whether it's hard or not, it's still criminal, right?
It's a slap.
It's still a battery, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So as a regular, ordinary citizen, I think you saying that the blow wasn't hard is another reason that you have the exoneration for, I think it was DeMoss, right?
That's correct.
For use of force.
That's correct.
Okay, but you also talked about there not being anything in the policy of state police, a duty to intervene.
There is now. At the time.
There is now. When was that put into place?
I would say it was after Colonel Davis was appointed.
After Colonel Davis. So in the past, if an incident such as Ronald Greene's were to happen and there were officers standing around and did not intervene, nothing would be done to those officers? Have you ever seen anything any findings against those officers who stood by and did nothing while somebody was being injured or use of force was being handled, and they were the supervisor?
Not in my investigation knowledge.
You had not seen that?
Not in my time in investigations.
Okay. Would you have had any interactions with Albert Paxton or Johnny Scott Brown?
No, ma'am.
You had none?
No, ma'am.
So they were Bureau of Investigation, right?
That's correct.
So they don't work in conjunction with any other investigation? Because, they came to this table and said that they were limited to the things that they were able to get. Not only were they limited, but we heard written testimony, well, at least an email or testimony today by the coroner, that he also made multiple requests for information that he was unable to get from state police. So it's consistent with what they said, but you would not have had any interactions with that. And your position at that time, you were never included in any of the conversations as it relates to Ronald Greene. Is that your testimony?
What do you mean by, when do you mean conversations?
Okay. The conversations, the meetings that may have been held by upper management, you were, at that time, what position were you in? Because I know you've been promoted.
In 2019 or 2020?
between 2019 and 2020, when all of this stuff was going on at state police, were you ever in a room with others where this discussion came up on the Ronald Greene's murder?
No, ma'am. My involvement when I was a captain of IA was after August the 25th.
Okay. And then you said that the FBI asked you for the record. Is that what I heard you say?
It was a subpoena
Subpoena
for
the
the
records?
department. Yes, ma'am.
And when was that?
I don't recall.
You don't recall?
I mean, I have the emails I can provide.
Approximately.
It would have been around the same time frame, October. When the investigation was going on.
When the
Our administrative
October of
investigation.
2020. Well, then it gets very convoluted for me because Kevin Reeves sent an email that we have possession of stating, he's sending an email to Faye Morrison and CC and Bob Brown, who was your supervisor, right, at the time? And this is June 25th, 2020. Where were you then?
I had just come into IA.
So you were in IA when this email came. So it appears that the FBI sent him an email the day before, like June 24th. He forwarded and asked for information to be forwarded to the federal investigation officer, the body camera footage, incident reports, and all of this same stuff. So he's asking for something to be forwarded to them in June, right? Including the IA investigation, but that I guess wasn't even in existence at that time.
So at that time, Internal Affairs did not have this case.
So although they asked for it, because I guess the federal government would have thought that y'all would have had one going on, right?
Yes, ma'am.
They just assumed that y'all had investigated your own, right?
Correct.
And that hadn't happened.
That's correct.
So all of the things that they're asking for in here, that happened in June. But you still say from June to August, what happened?
I was not a part of any Ronald Greene conversation.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you another question. Did you have your phone sanitized at
No,
any
ma'am.
time?
No, ma'am.
So your phone is currently the same as it was during this, prior to this, right?
I use my personal phone for work. But yes, it is the same phone.
It is the same. So you would not have had any texts or anything from your phone regarding Ronald Greene? So if we ask for your records from your phone, are there any conversations as it relates to the Ronald Greene's murder?
I don't know.
You don't know?
And if there are, I'd be happy to share them.
Okay. Well, maybe that's something we need to look at because it appears that your memory is a little foggy when it comes to certain things, and we want to make sure that we get it right, and we don't want to accuse you of not telling us the truth. But I think if maybe we can get, where's the chairman, to maybe look at some of your phone records and text messages, maybe we can help clear up when you knew what at what time.
Okay.
Right? Thank you. Turn the chair back over to the chair.
Thank you. Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Deputy Superintendent Eskew, what is the protocol when a subpoena is received? Let me ask you this. Who was the subpoena directed to?
Most, I believe, are directed to the colonel.
Okay. And what is the protocol, to your knowledge, when a subpoena is received? That this subpoena was received sometime in the fall of 2020, based on your recollection. What is that protocol?
So Office of Legal Affairs would get it and distribute it to the appropriate sections, and the appropriate sections would gather whatever information is responsive, give it back to OLA, and then they would submit the...
And the person in charge of Office of Legal Affairs at that time, who was that?
Faye Morrison.
And what specifically was requested in that subpoena?
Which one?
Whichever subpoena you're
it would've
testifying
been-
to, is there more than one?
So It would have been anything related to the Ronald Greene investigation, and for my part of it would have been in internal affairs.
And to your knowledge, is that subpoena copied to the governor by Office of Legal Affairs?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, you testified earlier that you received an email in August of 2020 that instructed you to begin the IA, correct?
Yes, sir.
At that time, just prior to that, in June of 2020, I think the federal investigators had requested whatever evidence was in the custody of LSP to initiate the federal investigation, or in continuance thereof, correct?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's safe to assume, and especially we know that perhaps is still going on, that in August of 2020, there was a continuing criminal investigation into this matter, correct?
Yes, sir.
Testified earlier that the general operating procedure, standard, I don't know what you called it, was that IA did not begin until the criminal was over, yet the IA was begun while the criminal was ongoing if it started in August. I think we can draw that conclusion. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my question is, what triggered the IA? If the standard operating procedure is we're going to finish criminal before we start IA, what flipped the switch, so to speak, to make the IA, to deviate from what had been going on since May 10th, 2019?
I personally don't know. That would be a question for Chief Brown or the Colonel.
Well, obviously something happened, and I don't know if was it a newspaper article? Was it the George Floyd homicide? Was it the lawsuit filed by the family? Was it a leak? Was it a knowledge that a leak was coming? I mean, do we know what it was that suddenly made it important that an IA proceed while the criminal investigation was ongoing?
I don't know, sir.
All right. I believe you. Okay, and secondly, I think we ought to note that you received the IA instructions in August. You conducted the investigation. You presented it to the review committee, the disciplinary review committee, and action was taken fairly quickly. But you were not engaged prior to August 2020 in any way, shape, or form.
No, sir.
All right. So that you guys did your job from that point forward in a timely manner, and it resulted in action, I think is commendable. Okay, so I just want to make that note, and I will also note I think your answers to the questions changed significantly after Colonel Davis gave you permission to answer questions, and your reluctance was obvious prior to that. I appreciate the fact that you've testified that in the IA you saw excessive force, which you thought was criminal. And I think it's worth noting, and I want to clarify this. The disciplinary review committee is composed of a group of people, and I look back on my notes, I saw where Major Oliphant was part of that as well. But it was composed of a group who reviewed it, I guess talked about it, and then ultimately Colonel Reeves made a decision about what disciplinary action would be taken. Who decides not, so it is whether it's sustained, whether they're exonerated, whatever, those decisions are ultimately Colonel Reeves.
Ultimately, Colonel Reeves.
He is offered and listens to input, but it's his call.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
It's not by committee, it's his call.
Correct.
And he made the decision whether it was an exoneration or a sustainment or anything in between. That was his decisions.
So the sustainment, the finding is part of the investigation. Those findings and that information is presented to the DRC.
So you guys decide it's sustained or exonerated?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you say we have sustained this. Is there an override, or that's just your decision is final?
No, sir. The whole chain of command can chime in on their agreement or not with any
Right.
of the findings, up to the colonel, and the colonel has the final say to either agree with the findings of the investigation.
Were
or-
any of your findings not agreed to?
So in the York case, I recall that there were some sustainments that were combined together, like two policy violations. Why do we combine for one? And we would, in those cases, if something changes from our original report, we would do a supplemental and note what changed in the DRC.
All right. So, and was there an instance that's different? I mean, that's just you combine. That was an administrative call. But was there an instance where you guys thought that something should have been sustained, and your sustainment was reversed, and you went back and wrote an exoneration where you thought there was a sustainment?
No, sir.
Okay, so basically your decisions, other than technical combining, your recommendations were agreed to.
Yes, sir.
And at that point in time, when the colonel says or agrees or doesn't disagree, however you want to put it, then what you're saying is his authority at that point in time is to decide the degree of discipline that would be doled out, which he might say suspend or fire.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. And again, you don't know why the IA was investigated. What was the trigger that suddenly made the IA take place?
I don't know, sir.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bacala. I think that's all the questions we have for Lieutenant Colonel Eskew. We appreciate you being here. We also now open up to anybody from the public would like to testify. Okay, seeing nobody from the public, we will make a couple announcements. I'm sorry, Representative Vilio.
Could we ask Colonel Davis to come up for a moment?
Sure. Let's be brief. I am trying to keep us a little bit on a.
It literally should take 30 seconds. Right. Colonel Davis, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Could you just update the committee on the status of the IA investigation into the wiping of the phones, Lieutenant Colonel Doug Kane, and how many days has it been?
That investigation, as previously advised, was suspended and transferred to the Inspector General's office, and it is currently being conducted by the Inspector General's office. And I have been in contact with them. They are progressing with the investigation, but I can't tell you exactly where it's at.
No problem. Thank you for the update. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so we do read, and thank you, Colonel. There's other questions for you. We do have, I want to make the committee aware, we received a lengthy email from Aston Dyer that we also provide to the committee members, and you can read it. It's 4 pages in length, and it details his issues that he's had with state police, and references various issues of brutality and stuff like that. And that's it.